All right, guys, we are on Google Classroom. You have your Literacy Purple assignment, or your classroom. And then we're coming here to Black Like Me. You're going to click on the Cami export. And you're going to open with Cami. So you should have Annotate with Cami. If for some reason you don't have the app connected, come here to connect more apps. Search up Cami. And then this is what you want: Cami, PDF, and document annotation. So mine says rate it because I already have it, but yours should say connect. If you don't have it, press connect and it will populate for you. And then you're going to come here with open with annotate with Cami. I apologize in advance for my sniffles. My allergies. I know they've been bad for all year. Okay, and then we have our document. Okay, so I'm just going to talk you through what our story is, and I want you to annotate with me, okay? So here we have, our annotations isn't anything new from last year, right? You guys should be super familiar with it and understand the purpose of it. So when you come here, we're just going to kind of read through and dissect it. So I've lived my whole life. Again, let me go back. So Imani's our main character. It's an excerpt from this book called Fire on High. It's one of my favorites, actually. So here's Imani, and she's our protagonist in this story. So I've lived my whole life having people question what race I am. So I just made a connection. I've also had this. My mom's Irish, my dad's Spanish, Native American, and it's always been kind of something that people have questioned. All right. Not necessarily the homies I grew up with. In Fair Hill, we are mostly Spanish-speaking Caribbeans and Philly-raised Black Americans with roots in the South, which means in my hood, everyone's parents or great-grandparents got some kind of accent that ain't a Philly one. So I want us to highlight this. If we come to our tools, we have markup, text highlighter, or box highlighter, strike through, underline. I'm going to come to the comment section, and I'm going to annotate this. Did I do it right? Sorry, guys. Which means in my hood, everyone's got parents or great-grandparents or some kind of accent that ain't a Philly one. So I just want to say diverse, inclusive neighborhood. And it's multicultural, right? Just important for us to know as we're going through. But when people from a different neighborhood first meet me, they wonder why I don't fit in certain modes. I'm not going to annotate this necessarily, or I'm not going to make a comment. I just want us to highlight this. I think it's important to our character. The Latina grandmothers at the poppy store tisk tisk when they ask me a question in Spanish, and I answer with my chopped up tongue or worse in English. And I don't have enough skills to tell them, well, I didn't raise me speaking much Spanish. I can understand a lot of it because of her, but English is the language I learned at school and watched on TV. For the most part, even when we speak at home, I try not to be self-conscious about how little Spanish I know. But some days it feels like not speaking Spanish automatically makes me a bad Boricua, one who's forgotten her roots. So there's a lot in here too. I want us to take out the Latina grandmothers. So this is basically saying she's not fitting in with her Spanish side or her Puerto Rican side, right? I don't know if we wrote that yet, but we will. So she feels the disconnect, right? So let's highlight this. Oh, let me fix my thing. We're going to come to our comment box. I'm just going to use 3 colors because just so that each part stands out. You guys can do it however you would like. But I do need you to highlight all of this with me if you don't have your own annotations, because you're going to turn it in for me. The Latina grandmothers at the poppy store tisk tisk. Oops. Okay, we're highlighting this part. Disapproval, judgment from her. And again, I'm modeling how kind of sometimes we just have to process, like, what is it that we want to say? And when you're annotating, you're not saying something we already know. So we're not saying exactly the same thing. It's not a summary, it's an analysis, right? What does this mean? So disapproval, judgment from society, I guess. Let's put that. And she feels like not enough, not Latina. Because she doesn't speak Spanish, right? But as we see here, English is the language of her home, right? And in the sense of like, this is where she was born. And it does represent her too. So here, if we look at, again, this question, how is Imani's identity impacted by her race and culture? This is kind of where we see that, right? We're going to look a little bit more into it as well. All right. I try not to be self-conscious about how little Spanish I know, but some days it feels like not speaking Spanish automatically makes me a bad Boricua, one who's forgotten her roots. So this all kind of connects together. So I'm going to do the text markup. One who's forgotten her roots. I really like this idea of roots because it's like where you come from, okay? Connection with your ancestors, right? Or family. We don't need to say this, I just want to highlight it. So again, sometimes we're going to make comments, sometimes we are not. But as we can see, we've already pulled out important parts. All right, here we go. But on the flip side, folks wonder if I'm Black American enough. As if I want to highlight again this idea of being enough. A concept of being enough. And I just want to kind of ask the question, who decides this? How does this impact our identity? And for Imani, it's her race, right? She doesn't feel like her race is, she's enough of either. But for some of us, it can be other things too, right? But this idea of why aren't we enough? All right. As if my Puerto Rican side cancels out any Blackness. I just think this is important. And maybe too, you have it and you're like, well, I don't really know what I'm going to say about it. I know it's important. Well, you can always come back to it. Although if we only go according to skin, my Puerto Rican side is as Black as my Black American side. Okay, I want us to note this here. If we go, this idea of like identity within, shown by our skin color. Oftentimes, people make assumptions of who you are and make assumptions of who you are based on your skin tone, right? We know this. And sometimes it's not a negative. Sometimes it's just the assumption. But always assumptions we want to be careful of. Assumptions are never safe. And sometimes they do much more harm than good. And then this idea of, we know this, we see this, right? A lot. that's racism, right? And she's not necessarily talking about that, but I want us to really think about how she's both, right? She's Black and she's proud of being Black. She's Puerto Rican and she's Puerto Rican. But her skin tone doesn't show that she's Puerto Rican. So sometimes you feel like she doesn't connect to that as much. I don't know. Let's see. And the question is, society don't see this. So again, there's the idea of like you have to see in order for us to believe, or sometimes that's not the case. Okay. Not to mention Julio, this is her dad. She doesn't have a good relationship with her dad. And we can tell this because she's not calling him by his first name. Okay. All right. Maybe a lot of things, but he sure is proud of his African roots, and he's made sure I never forgot our history. And Bella doesn't shy. Oh, sorry guys, my brain goes fast, as you all know. I like this. We're gonna highlight this too. We're not gonna comment on it. We're just gonna mark it. And Bella doesn't shy away from her Blackness either, even if she's quieter with how she talks about it. I don't know how many times someone asks Bella for directions on the street, and the moment they hear an accent, a surprised "Oh, you Spanish" splits out of their mouth. Same ideas, right? This idea of the identity by the skin color and the assumptions that are made and the negative impact sometimes, right? How do you cling to an identity when people are telling you that it's not you? Abuela is also her abuela, her grandmother. I'm constantly having to give people geography and history lessons on how my grandmother's hometown is 65% Afro Puerto Rican, on how the majority of slaves were dropped off in the Caribbean and Latin America, on how just because our Black comes with bomba and mofongo doesn't mean it isn't valid. This is important, right? Doesn't mean it isn't valid. So this whole theme really is really important. I feel I'm going to use the box highlighter, and let's use blue. We're going to have double. I'm learning how to do this too, guys. Okay. And then let's comment this. Oh. You're like, miss, I'm trying to, okay. I want us just to make sure that we understand, like, this right here is the history of her culture and her identity, right? And so, especially in this year too, in U.S. history, we're going to learn about slavery. And a lot of times I think we don't know much about it, but this is good to know that a lot of, in the Caribbean, in Puerto Rico, they also had, as she said, on majority of slaves were dropped off there. And so you have this multicultural identity, and it doesn't mean it's valid, it's just different, right? So I want to add here, just because something doesn't fit our mold doesn't mean it isn't true or right. Now again, all of these here are just us understanding what Imani's trying to argue, right? Our main character. And it seems like I'm always defending the parts of me that I've inherited from my mother. All right, here too. Why does she need to defend herself? Why does she feel this way of, I always have to say, this is who I am. The roots that come from this country, the facts that Aunt Sarah tells me about our people in the Raleigh area, North Carolina. The little slangs she slips into her emails I know come from her mother, and her mother's mother, and her mother's mother's mother. I think this is just a really powerful statement. To the first African mother who touched foot on this here land. The same wisdom I whisper to baby girl every now. A reminder of who we are, of where and who we are from. I just think it's powerful. And it tells us a lot about Imani, right? This idea of family history is important to her. Why isn't it working? Sorry, guys. Thanks for being patient, even if we're on a video. Okay, let's try this. Right, so it's this idea of her family history and the legacy that she inherits. Okay, we'll go back. Legacy, oops. History of her family. Okay, and then I want you to look here. I want you to annotate this part. This stuff is complicated, but it's like some long division problem. Folks keep wanting to parcel into pieces, and they don't hear me when I say I don't reduce homies. The whole of me is black. The whole of me is whole. So I want you to think of this as kind of Imani's final thought, right? What does she leave us? She kind of goes through this journey while she's figuring out her identity. She's trying to identify, who is she? What makes me me? How does society impact that? How does my race and my culture impact that? So I want you to go back through and read through the notes, right? And I want you to add your own annotations here. And you're going to turn this in. This is a part of your assignment. And I'll show you how to do that in Zoom today. But this is what I want you to think about, okay? Annotate this paragraph. I see a couple of annotations to pull out. All right, guys, great job.